You have noticed subtle shifts in the avoidance behavior that create uneasy feeling you cannot quite articulate, changes that feel wrong despite appearing innocuous or even positive on surface level. The avoidant, who typically generated conflict through their withdrawal or their defended responses, has become suddenly agreeable, pleasant. Conflict avoidant in ways that feel uncharacteristic and unsettling. They make promises about future plans with unusual enthusiasm despite their historical pattern of resisting commitment to future activities. They remain physically present in the relationship while something essential has shifted in their emotional availability in ways you sense but cannot definitively identify. They respond to your normal behaviors with uncharacteristic irritation or interpret your reasonable requests as evidence of fundamental incompatibility. They announce sudden need to focus on self-improvement or personal growth in ways that position you as obstacle to their development rather than as partner who could support their growth. These behavioral shifts feel confusing because individually, each might seem neutral or even positive. Who would object to partner being more agreeable, more enthusiastic about future plans, more committed to personal growth? Yet your nervous system registers that something is fundamentally wrong, that these changes do not represent genuine positive development, but rather signal some shift in the avoidance position toward you and toward the relationship that these surface behaviors conceal. Your instinct is correct. These specific behavioral patterns represent pre-ghosting preparation that the avoidant engages in before disappearing from the relationship. Tactical positioning that serves their need to exit without direct confrontation while managing their own guilt and maintaining their self-concept as person who is not cruel or abandoning. The avoidant is preparing to ghost you, and these behavioral shifts serve specific functions in that preparation, creating justifications for their exit, managing the logistics of departure, protecting themselves from guilt by constructing narrative where ghosting feels justified or necessary, ensuring their exit can occur with minimal confrontation or accountability. Understanding these pre-ghosting patterns allows you to recognize what is occurring beneath surface presentation, allows you to see the preparation for abandonment that the avoidance defended behavior attempts to conceal, allows you to potentially protect yourself by initiating definitive ending on your terms rather than waiting for them to ghost you in ways that leave you confused and without closure. The third pattern particularly deserves attention because it represents the most reliable predictor that ghosting is imminent. When you observe this specific behavior, the avoidant has typically already made internal decision to exit and is simply managing the logistics and their own emotional comfort before implementing their departure. Missing or dismissing these warning signs leaves you vulnerable to being blindsided by sudden disappearance that feels incomprehensible, while recognizing these patterns allows you to understand what is occurring and to make informed decisions about how to proceed, rather than remaining passive victim of their defended exit strategy. They suddenly become excessively pleasant and conflict avoidant. The avoidant who has maintained pattern throughout the relationship of creating conflict through their withdrawal, their defensiveness, their irritation when you express needs or establish boundaries, suddenly shifts into unusually agreeable and pleasant mode where they avoid any confrontation or discord. They respond to requests that would typically trigger their defensive reactions with surprising compliance and agreeableness. They smile and nod when you express concerns that historically would have generated their withdrawal or their minimizing responses. They agree to plans or activities they would typically resist or deflect. They present as version of themselves that is easier, more accommodating, more pleasant than the defended person you have known throughout the relationship. This sudden shift feels positive initially. Perhaps they are finally hearing you. Perhaps they are making genuine effort to be a better partner. Perhaps the relationship is improving in ways you have hoped for across extended time. Yet this excessive pleasantness does not represent genuine positive change in their capacity or their investment in the relationship. Instead, the sudden agreeableness serves specific function in the avoidance preparation to ghost. It allows them to avoid confrontation or difficult conversations that might occur if they maintain their typical defended responses during the period before they exit. The avoidant has made internal decision to leave the relationship, yet they are not ready to implement that departure immediately. They need time to arrange logistics, to prepare themselves emotionally, to construct justifications that will allow them to feel acceptable about their choice to ghost. During this preparation period, maintaining their typical conflictual patterns would generate conversations and confrontations they no longer have investment in navigating because they have already decided to leave. The excessive pleasantness allows them to avoid these difficult interactions by presenting as if everything is fine while they finalize their exit strategy. The conflict avoidance particularly reveals itself in the avoidance responses to situations that would historically trigger their defensiveness or withdrawal. You express hurt about their pattern of canceling plans, and instead of their typical minimizing or defensive response, they offer unusually sincere-seeming apology and promise to do better. You establish boundary about behavior that harms you, and instead of their typical resistance or testing of that boundary, they immediately agree and comply without pushback. You request increased emotional availability, and instead of their typical deflection or withdrawal, they provide temporary surge of presence and sharing that feels uncharacteristically open. These accommodating responses feel like progress, like they are finally hearing you and responding to your needs. Yet the accommodation is tactical rather than genuine. They are providing what you want in the moment to avoid conflict or conversation that their impending departure makes irrelevant to them. The excessive pleasantness also serves to manage the avoidance guilt about their plan to ghost by allowing them to feel they gave the relationship good effort before leaving. When they look back after ghosting, they can tell themselves they were trying, they were being agreeable, they were making effort. The relationship just did not work despite their attempts. The period of pleasantness before ghosting provides the avoidant with evidence they can use to construct narrative where they are not bad person who abandoned relationship capriciously, but rather person who tried but ultimately needed to leave for valid reasons. The pleasantness serves as insurance against their own potential guilt by creating recent history of them being accommodating partner that makes their subsequent ghosting feel less cruel in their own self-assessment. The sudden shift to agreeableness also functions to keep you psychologically off balance and less likely to anticipate their departure. If the avoidant maintained their typical conflictual patterns, you might brace for potential breakup or might initiate ending yourself. The sudden pleasantness disrupts your accurate reading of the relationship's trajectory by suggesting things are improving when actually the avoidant is preparing to exit. This disruption makes their ghosting more shocking when it occurs, because the period immediately preceding the disappearance appeared positive rather than indicating deterioration. You are left confused about why they left when things seem to be getting better, unable to see that the improvement was performance rather than genuine shift. The excessive pleasantness particularly reveals itself through its performative quality. The avoidance agreeableness feels slightly off, slightly forced, slightly disconnected from genuine emotional engagement. They say the right words and take the right actions, yet something feels hollow about their compliance. They smile, but the smile does not reach their eyes. They agree to plans, but their agreement lacks the enthusiasm or genuine investment that would accompany actual desire to engage in those plans. They provide presence, but that presence feels mechanical rather than connected. Your nervous system may register this performative quality even when you cannot consciously articulate what feels wrong, generating vague unease about their behavior despite its surface appropriateness. Understanding that sudden excessive pleasantness signals preparation to ghost requires recognizing that genuine positive change in defended patterns occurs gradually through active work and typically includes explicit conversation about what is shifting and why. When the avoidant suddenly becomes more agreeable without having done therapeutic work on their patterns, without discussing their recognition of how their previous behavior affected you, without demonstrating sustained shift that extends beyond immediate agreeable responses, the pleasantness likely serves tactical function rather than representing authentic development. The shift is too sudden, too easy, too disconnected from the work that genuine transformation requires. This recognition allows you to see the excessive pleasantness as warning sign rather than as evidence of relationship improvement, allows you to prepare yourself for potential ghosting rather than being blindsided by departure that contradicts the apparently positive, recent trajectory. They start future faking to buy time while planning their disappearance. The avoidant begins making enthusiastic references to future plans, future milestones, future experiences. You will share together references that feel uncharacteristic given their historical resistance to committing to future activities or to discussing relationships' long-term trajectory. They suggest trips you should take together months from now, mention events they want to attend with you in upcoming season, discuss plans for holidays or celebrations that are weeks or months away. Reference future in ways that suggest they are invested in sustained relationship, extending well beyond present moment. This future-oriented conversation feels positive and reassuring, feels like evidence that they are finally comfortable with relationships' continuation, feels like they are overcoming their defended resistance to commitment by demonstrating investment in shared future. Yet this sudden enthusiasm about future plans does not represent genuine shift toward greater commitment or investment in the relationship's continuation. Instead, the future faking serves specific tactical function. It buys the avoidant time to finalize their exit strategy while keeping you engaged and unsuspecting, prevents you from questioning the relationship's viability or from initiating ending yourself during the period when they are preparing to ghost. The avoidant makes promises about future they have no intention of keeping, creates impression of ongoing relationship that extends beyond their planned departure date, generates your continued investment and reduced vigilance by making you believe the relationship is stable and moving forward, when actually the avoidant is actively planning their exit. The future faking particularly reveals itself through the contrast between the avoidant's current, enthusiastic promises about future and their historical resistance to making plans or commitments. The avoidant, who typically deflected when you attempted to make plans beyond immediate future, suddenly becomes eager to discuss activities months away. The avoidant, who avoided conversations about relationships' trajectory, suddenly brings up long-term possibilities, unprompted. The avoidant, who resisted committing to holidays or events, suddenly suggests elaborate future experiences you will share. This sudden shift from resistance to enthusiasm about future should trigger questions about what has changed to generate this uncharacteristic forward-looking perspective. Yet the shift is often so desired that you accept it uncritically rather than investigating what might be driving the sudden change in their approach to future planning. The future faking serves multiple functions for the avoidant preparing to ghost. First, it prevents conversations about relationship problems or about the avoidance patterns that might occur if you perceive the relationship as unstable or ending. When the avoidant is making enthusiastic plans for months ahead, you are less likely to initiate difficult conversations about their patterns or to question whether the relationship should continue. Why would you question relationships' viability when your partner is actively planning shared future? The future faking creates appearance of stability that discourages your critical assessment of whether the relationship actually meets your needs or whether the avoidance patterns have improved in sustainable ways. Second, the future faking allows the avoidant to maintain relationship on terms that serve their immediate needs while they prepare their exit. They continue receiving your emotional support, your physical intimacy, your provision of whatever functions you serve in their life, without having to actually invest in building sustainable future with you. The false promises about future secure your continued provision of these benefits during the period before they ghost, without requiring them to actually follow through on the commitments they are making. They get what they want from you in present, while creating false impression that they are invested in future that they have already decided will not include you. Third, the future faking manages the avoidance guilt about their plan to ghost by creating narrative they can use to justify their departure. When they ghost after having made enthusiastic plans for future, they can tell themselves that they genuinely thought the relationship would continue, that they were trying to make it work, that circumstances changed, or they realized something that made departure necessary despite their intentions. The future faking provides evidence they can use to construct story, where they are not cruel person who planned abandonment while misleading you, but rather person whose feelings or circumstances shifted in ways that made departure necessary, despite their good intentions. The future faking also reveals itself through specific quality of the promises. They tend to be enthusiastic, but vague, exciting, but lacking concrete detail or immediate action steps. The avoidance suggests wonderful trip you should take, but does not actually begin planning that trip or making concrete arrangements. They mention event months away that you should attend together, but does not commit to purchasing tickets or making reservations. They discuss relationship milestones or experiences in abstract enthusiastic terms, but avoids specific conversation about timeline or logistics that would transform vague future possibility into concrete plan. This combination of enthusiasm without concrete action reveals that the promises serve performative function rather than representing genuine intention to follow through, understanding that sudden future faking signals. Preparation to ghost requires recognizing that genuine shift toward greater commitment manifests through actions rather than just words, through concrete planning rather than just abstract discussion, through sustained pattern of follow-through rather than through one-time surge of enthusiastic promises. When the avoidant suddenly becomes enthusiastic about future, without corresponding shift in their present behavior, without concrete actions that demonstrate they are actually working toward the future they describe, without addressing their patterns that have prevented such commitment historically, the future faking serves tactical function of buying time and maintaining your engagement rather than representing authentic investment in building shared future with you. They create emotional distance while maintaining a logistical presence. Don't ignore. The avoidant begins implementing clear emotional withdrawal while maintaining their physical presence in the relationship and continuing to perform the logistical aspects of partnership. They still see you regularly, still engage in routine activities together, still maintain the structural framework of the relationship. Yet something essential has shifted in their emotional availability and investment that creates palpable distance despite their continued presence. They are physically there, but psychologically absent. They participate in relationship activities, but without genuine engagement or connection. They maintain the appearance of relationship while withdrawing the emotional substance that makes relationship meaningful. This emotional distance while maintaining logistical presence represents the most reliable predictor that ghosting is imminent because it demonstrates the avoidant has already made internal decision to exit and is managing their emotional disengagement while finalizing practical arrangements before implementing their departure. The emotional distance manifests through multiple observable changes in how the avoidant engages with you and with the relationship. They become less responsive to your emotional bids for connection when you share something about your day. They respond with minimal acknowledgement rather than with genuine interest. When you express feelings, they provide perfunctory response rather than engaged emotional attunement. When you reach for emotional intimacy, they go through motions of responding without genuine presence or vulnerability. The avoidant is performing relationship participation while withholding actual emotional investment, maintaining surface connection while withdrawing genuine engagement. The emotional withdrawal also reveals itself in the avoidant's decreased initiation of contact or connection. They still respond when you reach out, still participate when you initiate activities, but they have stopped initiating contact themselves or suggesting time together or reaching for connection unprompted. The relationship continues only through your initiation and your effort. If you stopped reaching out, the avoidant would allow contact to lapse rather than pursuing connection themselves. This shift from whatever limited reciprocal initiation existed to complete reliance on your initiative demonstrates the avoidant has withdrawn their investment while maintaining just enough response to your efforts to keep relationship technically continuing until they are ready to ghost. The emotional distance particularly manifests through the avoidant's eyes and their presence. Even when they are physically with you, they seem distant, preoccupied, psychologically elsewhere. They look at you, but do not see you. They listen to you speak, but do not hear you. They are present in body, but absent in spirit. You can feel that they are not truly with you even when you are together, that some essential part of them has withdrawn to a place you cannot access, that they are going through motions of relationship while being fundamentally disengaged from actual connection with you. This quality of absent presence creates particularly disturbing feeling because the avoidant's physical presence contradicts your nervous system's accurate perception that they have emotionally departed. The maintenance of logistical presence while withdrawing emotionally serves specific functions in the avoidance ghosting preparation. First, it allows them to manage the practical and logistical aspects of departure. If you live together, they need time to find new living situation. If you share responsibilities or commitments, they need time to extract themselves from those entanglements. If you are integrated into their social world, they need time to prepare how they will explain the relationship's ending. Maintaining physical presence while emotionally disengaging allows them to handle these logistics without the complications that would arise if they implemented both emotional and physical departure simultaneously. Second, the maintenance of logistical presence while emotionally withdrawing allows the avoidant to manage their own emotional process of leaving. The avoidant is detaching themselves emotionally before implementing physical departure, creating internal distance that makes the eventual ghosting feel less difficult for them. By withdrawing emotionally first, while remaining physically present, they are essentially practicing leaving, creating psychological separation that will make actual departure easier when they implement it. The period of emotional distance, while physically present, serves as transition where they are preparing themselves psychologically for the complete absence that ghosting will create. Third, the emotional distance while maintaining logistical presence prevents you from accurately assessing the relationship status and taking protective action. If the avoidant withdrew, both emotionally and physically, you would recognize the relationship is ending and could prepare yourself or initiate definitive ending on your terms. By maintaining physical presence and continuing relationship activities while withdrawing emotionally, the avoidant keeps you confused about what is happening, prevents you from seeing clearly that they are preparing to leave, maintains you in relationship until they are ready to ghost, rather than giving you opportunity to end things yourself or to prepare for their departure. The emotional distance while maintaining logistical presence also reveals itself through the avoidant's resistance to depth or vulnerability, even as they continue participating in relationship routines. They will engage in surface activities, watching television together, having meals, running errands, but they deflect or avoid any conversation that requires emotional depth or genuine sharing. They resist your attempts to discuss the relationship, the distance you are sensing, concerns you have about their withdrawal. They perform participation in relationships' logistical framework while refusing engagement with the relationship's emotional substance, maintaining the shell of partnership while withdrawing its meaningful content. Understanding that emotional distance while maintaining logistical presence signals imminent ghosting requires trusting your perception that something fundamental has shifted despite the avoidant's continued physical presence. When you sense that the avoidant is gone, despite being there, when you feel their absence, despite their presence, when you recognize they are participating without engaging, you are accurately perceiving their emotional withdrawal that precedes their physical departure. This pattern represents the most reliable warning that ghosting is approaching, because emotional departure typically precedes physical departure. By days or weeks, the avoidant withdraws internally. First, then implements external departure once they have completed their emotional disengagement and managed necessary logistics. Recognizing this pattern allows you to see what is occurring and to protect yourself, rather than remaining confused about the distance you sense until they complete their ghosting and disappear without explanation. They manufacture justifications by provoking or misinterpreting your behavior. The avoidant begins engaging in pattern of interpreting your normal, reasonable behavior as problematic, reframing your legitimate responses as evidence of your inadequacy or incompatibility, provoking your reactions, then characterizing those reactions as justification for their planned departure. You express hurt about their withdrawal, and they characterize your expression as you being too needy or too emotional. You establish boundary about behavior that harms you, and they interpret your boundary as evidence you cannot accept them as they are. You respond with normal frustration to their pattern of canceling plans, and they position your frustration as proof of fundamental incompatibility. This pattern of manufacturing justifications serves crucial function in the avoidance preparation to ghost. It allows them to construct narrative where their departure is justified response to your problematic behavior rather than being abandonment of adequate partner, allows them to feel their ghosting is reasonable rather than cruel, provides them with story they can tell themselves and others about why the relationship ended, that positions you as the problem rather than acknowledging their patterns drove the ending. The manufacturing of justifications often operates through the avoidance, selective interpretation of your behavior. They focus on responses they can characterize as problematic, while ignoring the context that generated those responses or their role in creating the situations they are now using as evidence against you. You express hurt about their pattern of emotional unavailability, and the avoidant focuses on your emotional expression as evidence you are too demanding, while ignoring that their unavailability legitimately generated your hurt. You become frustrated after they cancel plans for third time, and the avoidant focuses on your frustration as evidence you are not understanding, while ignoring that their repeated cancellations reasonably generated your frustration. The avoidant extracts your responses from their context, treating them as evidence of your character flaws rather than as reasonable reactions to their patterns. The provocation operates more actively when the avoidant deliberately engages in behavior designed to generate your negative response that they can then use as justification for leaving. They become increasingly unavailable or withdrawn, provoking your pursuit or your expression of concern that they can then characterize as you being clingy or needy. They make commitment, then break it repeatedly, provoking your frustration or hurt that they can then characterize as you being unable to handle their need for flexibility or spontaneity. They create situations where your reasonable boundaries or your normal emotional responses can be reframed as evidence of your inadequacy or your problematic patterns that make relationship untenable. The Avoidant is essentially baiting you into responses they will use against you, creating evidence they need to feel justified in their planned ghosting. The justification manufacturing also operates through the avoidance sudden shift in how they characterize qualities they previously accepted or even appreciated about you. Traits that were not previously problems suddenly become insurmountable obstacles. Your emotional expressiveness, that they previously seemed fine, with suddenly becomes evidence you are too emotional for them to handle. Your desire for consistency, that was not previously characterized as problematic, suddenly becomes evidence you are too rigid or too demanding. Your normal relationship expectations that they previously accommodated without complaint suddenly become proof of fundamental incompatibility. This recharacterization of your stable qualities as newly discovered problems reveals that the issue is not your behavior or your traits, but rather is the avoidance need to construct justifications for departure they have already decided to implement. The manufactured justifications serve the avoidance need to maintain acceptable self-concept while abandoning relationship through ghosting. The avoidant cannot comfortably see themselves as cruel person who abandons adequate partner without explanation. Such self-perception would create guilt and shame. The avoidance defensive structure resists experiencing. Instead, the avoidant constructs narrative where their departure is justified response to legitimate problems with you or with the relationship you were too needy, too emotional, too demanding, incompatible with their needs, unable to accept them as they are. This narrative transforms ghosting from cruel abandonment into reasonable decision to leave relationship that was not working, allowing the avoidant to implement departure without facing full weight of guilt that ghosting adequate partner would generate. The justification manufacturing also serves function of managing how the avoidant explains the relationship's ending to others. When friends or family ask why the relationship ended, the avoidant can provide the manufactured justifications as explanation. The relationship did not work because you were too emotional, too demanding, incompatible with their needs. These justifications position the ending as mutual incompatibility or as your inadequacy, rather than as the avoidance choice to ghost someone who is attempting to maintain relationship. The manufactured justifications provide socially acceptable explanation that protects the avoidance reputation and their social relationships from potential judgment about their choice to ghost.